This episode of The Reality Check is brought to you by HelloFresh. Forget takeout. HelloFresh delivers all the ingredients for delicious, healthy meals anyone can prepare at home in less than 30 minutes. And HelloFresh is giving our Canadian checkers 50% off their first order. Go to hellofresh.ca and use promo code REALITY50 to get 50% off your first order. That's hellofresh.ca, promo code REALITY50. This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is the show for August 1st, 2017, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, Cuboids?
Cristina Roach.
Hello.
And producer Pat.
Hi everyone.
We have a great show for you today. Cristina is going to look into internet trolling, and I'm going to look into calculating storm distance using thunder and lightning. But first, are women more likely to be harassed online than men? Adam tells us more.
Great question, Darren. The Pew Research Center recently conducted a study on online harassment, and the results will surprise you. Actually, they might not surprise you at all, depending on what news source's lens you view the results through. With so much data, many have put more focus on what they like to see and less on what didn't fit their own preconceptions, which can make it have limited value. I'll attempt to give as clear a look at this data as I can with some analysis on what this could mean and limitations this study might have. The panelists surveyed were randomly selected US landlines and cell phones. They conducted monthly self-administered web surveys, which included this data, which was collected from January 9th to the 23rd of this year, 2017. This included 4,248 respondents. We've talked a bit about limitations of contacting people by phone in the past when we talked about election polling. Not everyone has a landline, and among those that have cell phones, not everyone is going to answer when asked to do a survey. The limitation of the survey to me seems to be a drastically variable response rate from different demographic groups. Specific to this survey, there is a frequent highlight of the significant impact of harassment among the younger demographics, such as the statistics stating that those between 18 and 29 years old, of which 67% have been the target of online harassment, as opposed to only 49% for the 30 to 49-year-old demographic and 22% for those over 50. So what's the problem? Well, the sample size is particularly low for the 18 to 29 group, with only 246 men and 260 women from that range responding, totaling 506 people. Other age group more than double this, with 1,209 from the 30 to 49 group and 1,369 from the 50 to 64 group, and 1,160 in the 65 and older group. So, to me, that's a big problem. I don't know exactly why the response rate is so low. It could have something to do with younger people being less likely to have landlines, but there could be some other factors that I'm just not aware of. As a result, different error levels are given for different demographic levels for what would be expected at a 95% confidence level. While most groups have a 5 to 5.5 percentage point error, the 18 to 29 group has an 8.5% error, with that number growing to 12.1 and 11.8 for men and women in those demographics being taken on their own. So I'm going to throw a bunch of numbers out at you, but keep in mind those 18 to 29 groups are relatively small, so these numbers might not be perfect. Overall, the study suggests that some 41% of people have experienced some sort of online harassment. I recall doing a similar survey at work at one point, and when I was asked some of the vaguer questions about name calling, I asked, does this mean today? Though I may not frequent some of the more depraved online haunts as I used to, it wouldn't be unusual for me to be subjected to and perhaps engage in some level of what a person could consider to be online harassment in any given week. And so when we talk about online harassment, it is indeed important to talk about things being in various degrees. The survey breaks harassment down into less severe behaviors, such as offensive name calling, some 27% of all online harassment, and purposeful embarrassment, which is about 22%. More serious behavior would include physical threats, which are 10% of harassment, sustained harassment, which is 7%, stalking, 7%, and sexual harassment, which is 6%. So while harassment is fairly common, 22% of those surveyed have experienced only the less severe behaviors, while 18% have experienced what is referred to as more severe. So why am I even talking about this? We like to cover things that are in some way unintuitive. In this case, the surprising data this survey found was that men experience more online harassment than women. This certainly doesn't fit with the narrative that we have of harassment on the internet. On the day I was preparing this segment, for example, I saw an article on the Mary Sue titled, "A Marvel Comics editor is being harassed because she posted a selfie with her coworkers. Comics has a sexism problem." This article goes on to explain how after this particular artist posted a photo of her and her female colleagues, there were many men who jumped in and harassed her. Now, I'm not seeking to trivialize this particular event or excuse the actions of those who responded inappropriately. The point is that a story speaks to us more than numbers, and that the conversation focuses on stories and anecdotes, but here at TRC, we want to talk about data. Boring data. So the Gamergate controversy is another example of this. Harassment is such a key part of the public discourse of Gamergate, that some call it the Gamergate harassment campaign. Most people with only passing knowledge of the issue only know that Gamergate is about a bunch of angry male gamers who harass some women. The truth is perhaps more nuanced, and one can't say what something means for all people involved, but proponents of Gamergate will usually say that it's about ethics in game journalism. The movement itself originated as a reaction to female game developer Zoe Quinn and her personal and sexual relationships with people in game journalism. Apparently, the way to combat poor ethics in journalism is with tabloid-level gossip. It's certainly the case that many women in the world of gaming have been the subject of a great deal of harassment, but many proponents of Gamergate have contended that the harassers are a minority among them who don't represent them, and that harassment goes both ways. The evidence, more anecdotes about harassment from the anti-Gamergate crowd. But then people can just pick and choose examples of anecdotes, and this doesn't really tell us anything. It just gives us a bunch of stories. So what does the data say? This is important. Well, it says, at the high level, that men are more likely to be harassed than women. And how can this be? When considering all forms of harassment, 44% of men and 37% of women have experienced one of the behaviors the study categorized as online harassment. Now, we can think of many reasons for which this might be true. The study doesn't focus on who's doing the harassing, but rather those targeted. Sometimes you can't tell who's doing the harassment. There's a lot of times where it's anonymous, so it's harder to study that. If more men are doing the harassing, men may simply be interacting with more men. Men, like younger people in general, may simply be spending more time online or online in different places, which may be contributing to them being exposed to more harassment, for example. The two specific types of harassment which men are more likely to experience than women are being called offensive names, 30% for men and 23% for women, and physical threats, and that's 12% for men and 8% for women. Truth be told, I'd be more likely to name call or idly threaten a man than a woman. Does that make me sexist? But wait. Women are the subject of some other forms of harassment in greater numbers, mainly sexualized harassment.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to pan out your segment a little bit before I jumped in and said, I don't think a lot of men are targeting a man by saying, I'm going to rape you online. So I figured sexual harassment would come into play here.
Well, they may be, but I'm not sure those threats would
register
be taken
the same
seriously
way
as well.
Yeah.
So in the 18 to 29 age group, some 21% of women report being sexually harassed. Only 9% of men do. If we restrict this range to an even lower age, the gap grows even more. In the 18 to 24 range, 20% of women have been sexually harassed online, while only 6% of men that age have been. The report also mentions that 53% of women aged 18 to 29 have received unsolicited explicit images. More on that later.
Wow.
So what's going on here? If men are harassed more than women, why is the opposite what we usually hear about? Well, the seriousness could be a factor, with men being the target of less serious harassment or threats that aren't expected to be followed through on. As a man, I've never felt the level of unease walking through the streets late at night that many women do, and that sentiment may translate to the internet as well. Indeed, men and women differ in their attitudes towards the importance of online harassment. 83% of women 18 to 29 consider online harassment a major problem, while only 55% of men in this age demographic share this view. When asked if people should be able to feel welcome and safe in online spaces, 63% of women agreed with this compared to only 43% of men. Flipping this around, men are more likely to say that people should be able to speak their minds freely online, with 56% of men agreeing with this versus 36% of women. So that was the same question. Basically, you had to choose one or the other. Similarly, when asked to choose if either people too often excused offensive online content or took it too seriously, the opinions of women and men were different. 64% of men and only 49% of women thought that offensive content was taken too seriously, while on the flip side, 35% of men and 50% of women found that it was too often excused. There was an even sharper difference in the 18 to 29 range, with 73% of men thinking offensive content was taken too seriously, with only 54% of women in that age demographic agreeing with that same statement.
Interesting numbers, Adam. And just a quick reminder for the listeners that because of the plus or minus error bars related to these percentage points, sometimes even if something is a 5 or 10% difference, there may not be a statistically significant difference. But if there's something probably 10 to 15 to 20% difference, is probably more likely to be true, quote unquote.
It's a great point, Darren, especially in those 18 to 29 year ranges with a small sample size. There's a lot of error, as is covered in the methodology section of this particular research. Now, perceived reasons for harassment also seem to differ between genders as well. Men are more likely to be harassed for their political views, with 19% of men and 10% of women stating politics as a reason for being harassed. But women state gender as a reason for being harassed, with 11% of women saying they were harassed because of their gender compared to only 5% of men. Indeed, if women are feeling they are being harassed for being women, their gender is going to be part of the discussion on the topic. Another question is, where are people being harassed online? 58% say that it occurred on social media. Next is the comments section with 23%. These are generally the largest cesspool on the internet.
Let's just take a step back and who thinks about who posts any comment anywhere on the internet.
Messaging apps account for 15%. Email accounts for 10%. Online gaming accounts for 10%, discussion sites 7%, and dating sites 6%. I'm surprised dating sites is so low with some of the things I've heard.
Mm-hmm. But those wouldn't necessarily be anonymous, right?
Dating sites, I guess it depends on the site. Sometimes it's going to have a name, sometimes it's going to be a username. But I think, again, this comes to, is a story saucier? Is a story more convincing? Maybe you hear about some of these horror stories, but they may not represent the largest swaths of online harassment. Not to discount the severity of these, but we're trying to look at some numbers. Most of this occurs between both genders fairly equally, except for online games. 15% of men report being harassed in online games as opposed to 4% of women. In the 18 to 29 year range, 31% of men reported their more recent harassment experience was in an online game, with only 4% of women in that same age group saying the same. So again, this is a measurable data point we can use when we're talking about women in games. The story often suggests that women are driven out of games due to their treatment online and in online games, and it seems like men are more likely to experience online harassment in online games, but this may also be a side effect of how many and what kinds of games they're playing. It could be that men are playing more of these online games, or it could be that some women don't even bother. Finally, when looking at the issue of explicit images of people, the numbers aren't what I would have expected. Men and women receive roughly the same number of unsolicited explicit images, with 32% of women and 30% of men stating that they have received them. This gap is again greater in the 18 to 29 range, with 53% of women receiving unsolicited explicit images as compared to only 37% of men in that range. Numbers for those who had explicit images of them shared without consent were surprisingly close, with slightly more men saying that they were the victims, with 7% compared to 6% in women. In the 18 to 29 range, 14% of men reporting having explicit pictures of themselves shared without their consent, while only 10% of women had. These numbers really surprised me. I never would have expected that.
Although, given that close numbers, it might be statistically the same.
Indeed. But we can say that if the numbers were much larger for women than men, it would probably be showing up in these results.
Those numbers are shocking, Adam, actually.
Oh, yeah. I never would have expected that. Now, apologies for sharing a lot of numbers, but I thought it was important to touch on some data behind a topic on which there's a lot of discussion online. Indeed, men experience more harassment than women online, but women are subject to more severe forms of harassment, more sexual harassment, and they take that harassment more seriously. Try to consider how different people can have different feelings on a topic when engaging and empathizing with others online. I've only really scratched the surface of this research. I would recommend you check out the full report, which is linked in the show notes at trcpodcast.com. Try not to get too distracted from the cold, hard data by the, in their own words, anecdotes that are spread throughout the research.
Of course. Good job, Adam. It's a very important issue that is exceptionally difficult to study.
Oh, yeah.
And so this I almost see as like a first stab. If you think about what you'd want, well, you'd want to figure out like a particular domain and almost isolate it. Like say, I don't know, the New York Times or say a certain subset of Facebook, and you'd figure out what's the proportion of men and women using it.
Yep.
And then you'd have a very similar or high sample rate. Because, you know, like, oh, who actually volunteered to take the survey? Right?
Yep.
Is that a bias sample? Are people who are more likely to be harassed to take it or the reverse?
Yep.
Hard to know. And hard to know if that would split among men and women. And then, as you said, how it's experienced is also a key feature. Would men and women, you get into dangerous territory here, but if a man is slapped and a woman is slapped, are they experiencing it the same way?
Yes.
Who's doing it? In what way? What's the context? It's very interesting, and I almost just need more research with more rigor.
And I think it does bear considering that the same statement made to different people can mean a very different thing. That doesn't just mean it's an illusion or one of them's taking it too seriously or not seriously enough. Different people in different demographics can have a different level of threat or can take a message with a different level of seriousness. And
Right.
that needs to be considered.
Right. So it's hard to know if the person is sincere in both attempts.
Yes.
And what's the reception of that. So you can almost have four categories, right? Yep. Person doesn't mean it, you don't care. Person doesn't mean it, you do care. Person does mean it, you don't care. Person does mean it, you do care.
Yeah. So it's tricky, and I hope I didn't try to oversimplify it. By giving this kind of headline, "Men get harassed more online than women." I think there's more to it when you drill down into the data.
Speaking of negative experiences online, internet trolling and arcade fire. Cristina, tell us more.
Well, whether you're into their music or not, there's no question that Canadian indie band Arcade Fire is one of the biggest bands in the world right now. And the band often comes under criticism for being arrogant or hipster elitist, but that's subjective and haters are going to hate, right?
That is their purpose in life.
That is correct. Case in point, here's a sub-headline from an article in Uproxx, a popular online music publication. Arcade Fire has always flirted with, if not unapologetically embraced, pomposity in its music, but the Everything Now campaign betrays a new, dispiriting arrogance that has verged on patronizing toward its audience. Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I like the way those words sound. I don't know what they mean, but I like the way they sound.
Now, my take, they're pretty brilliant at marketing their own records, and the latest one has been a masterful exercise in trolling and riding the fake news wave of the Trump era. In fact, Uproxx has another article that says, if the goal of a press campaign is to get people to pay attention to what you're doing, then Arcade Fire have been doing quite well for themselves. And they are absolutely right. So there's a lot of moving parts here. I'm just going to touch upon a few things for the sake of brevity, but I link to some fun background articles and social media links at trcpodcast.com if you're interested in reading more.
That's a great website.
It is. The marketing campaign that Uproxx refers to is the one leading up to the release of the band's latest album titled Everything Now. It dropped on July 28th, so just last week. Adam, that means released.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
In an interesting piece by Greg Bouchard on music site A-Side, quote, over the last couple of months, the band have released a series of fake news pieces that spread various kinds of misinformation in an effort to critique the culture of infinite content that we find ourselves inhabiting today. Now, that's a pretty succinct way to put it. The band has unleashed a bunch of news over the last couple of months designed to look real, even copying the appearance of popular media sites like Hollywood Reporter or Billboard magazine. On June 30th, the story was published about Arcade Fire's apparent disastrous video project with Terry Gilliam of Monty Python fame. The story details an ambitious yet failed project that was bankrupting the band. I mean, when I say detailed, we're talking detailed. And Terry Gilliam even tweeted about it. But if you fell for the story at Hollywood Reporter, you failed to notice a couple of tiny details that would have given it away. The website URL for the real Hollywood Reporter is hollywoodreporter.com. But the URL for this piece is Hollywood with 3 O's, reporter.co. Even the company logo at the top left of the page is titled The Hollywood Reported. Now, the next fake story is probably one of my favorites because it's just so ridiculous, yet still fooled and outraged many because of the band's perceived rep as being kind of full of themselves. Pat, you will love this one. The piece looks like it was published on Billboard.com, which is a music industry, a well-respected music industry magazine. But once again, the URL is Billboard with 3 L's, not 2, .co, not com. The news item claims that the band has filed a trademark application for their whoop. Here's an excerpt. After careful and sometimes agonizing consideration, says Jared Fleming, Arcade Fire's longtime lawyer, the band contends their signature wah-oh sequence has been plagiarized by several top acts and therefore seeks fair and just compensation. Now, they're talking about the extremely popular and anthemic single Wake Up and a melody called the Millennial Whoop. A millennial whoop is a real thing. It's a musical vocal effect utilizing the wah and oh syllables in a repeating pattern on the 5th and 3rd notes in a major scale, and definitely was not invented by or unique to the band. It's used quite extensively in modern pop music, actually. Several artists like Katy Perry, Justin Bieber, Kings of Leon, Fall Out Boy, etc. The list goes on. Arcade Fire singer Win Butler even tweeted out a, quote, cryptic message that seemed to corroborate the piece and later deleted it, causing more tongues to wag. The tweet said, "These people owe us their careers. Show us the receipts and the royalties." So if you tried to visit any of the links at the bottom of the page that makes it look like a legit Billboard article on their site, it either brings you back to the top of the article or it brings you to the Everything Now Twitter page. It's another clue that the story is fake. Yet these articles about the band's bankruptcy and lawsuits were shared and republished widely, tricking legit news and other music media. The band even trolled the ultimate troll himself, notorious alt-right guru Alex Jones and his site InfoWars. Jones's site URL is infowars.com, but a story published about lead singer Butler being leaked to extremist groups was made to look like his site to the undiscerning, infowars.ws. Now, this piece claimed some band members were on a U.S. watch list of subversive and extremist groups, while others were known for subliminal messaging and infiltrating the highest levels of U.S. government. A photo that accompanied the story says, quote, "As you can see in the photo below, Arcade Fire have been caught partying with Jay-Z and Beyonce, a well-known CIA stooge, and with Vice President Joe Illuminati Biden." One of the more controversial pieces that got a ton of reporting online, though you guys may have caught wind of it, is regarding a mandatory dress code for a special show the band did in Brooklyn the day before their album release. This show streamed live worldwide on Apple Music. Popular music sites like Consequence of Sound and Stereo Gum reported that a mandatory hip and trendy dress code was in effect, and everyone attending the show had to avoid wearing shorts, large logos, flip-flops, tank tops, crop tops, baseball hats, solid white or red clothing, which is weird, but the statement claimed the band reserved the right to deny entry to anyone dressed inappropriately. Furthermore, the show is said to be only 30 minutes in length, which is pretty ridiculous, and the gig was billed as a phone-free experience, stating all cell phones and smartwatches would be confiscated upon entry and stored in Yonder pouches during the show. Okay, two things about this story that may have helped fool people. The Yonder, spelled Y-O-N-D-R, that pouch exists. When Pat and I went to see Dave Chappelle, we had to put our phones in this neoprene pouch that locks with a strong magnetic seal, and it can only be easily opened by the company's device. The closest thing I can liken it to is like those security tags on clothes, that retailers remove. The device kind of looks like that. Also, Arcade Fire did ask fans to adhere to a formal attire or costume dress code for their 2013 tour dates. And there was a big backlash back then, with many calling the band's request pretentious. But the band eventually told everybody to just relax and it wasn't mandatory. However, hordes of fans did dress up, resulting in a pretty spiffy-looking audience on any concert footage, so kudos to them.
I remember reading one article about this when they did this in 2013, and it was hilarious. And what they said was, if you don't adhere to the dress code, the penalty will be each one of the members of Arcade Fire telling you why they don't own a TV.
Torture.
That's funny.
Torture. That's hilarious. Now, still, the subsequent reporting and Twitter storm resulting from this latest request was wide-sweeping, with tweets like, F that shit. Seriously, like an effing band would tell me what I'm allowed to wear to a show? Unreal. Or, simply, aging hipster douchebag.
That sounds like it's online harassment.
Right?
Yep, technically.
Others who are obviously onto them tweeted, perhaps Stereogum isn't familiar with the concepts of irony and wit. And someone else said, Arcade Fire are a bunch of trolls and I love it. The band went one step further by tweeting out a statement they say was faxed from their so-called social media manager, Tanis White. Let me read you this statement, guys, because it is amazing.
Did you say that the statement was faxed?
Yeah, statement faxed in from Tanis Wright, social media strategist for @EverythingNowCo, re Brooklyn Rules. The information sent to attendees of this week's Arcade Fire show in Brooklyn was made by me without the knowledge of the band. I was trying to class up the show a little bit because it's going to be seen by literally billions of people due to the involvement of our partners at Apple. Sue me for wanting something nice. The band has asked me to convey the following statements. You can wear whatever you want to the show. Whatever hip and trendy means is fine, but we also encourage old-fashioned and unpopular. If you choose to wear a logo, please make it an Arcade Fire or Everything Now logo. The show will run a normal length, not 30 minutes. And your phone will not be taken away, but it's easier to dance when you don't have your face planted in it. Thank you, Tanis Wright, social media manager for Everything Now Co. Now, one guy tweeted, the most worrying thing about the @Arcade Fire dress code meltdown is that their social media strategist communicates by fax. While another tweeter tweeted, what self-respecting social media strategist sends a fax? To which Tanis at Everything Now replied, they needed it right away. To which the tweeter then replied, Tanis, I think you broke the music blogosphere today. And he was absolutely right. Again, brilliant marketing. When Butler tweeted from his own account, band has nothing to do with a dress code or taking people's phones. Must be an @Apple thing. Maybe black turtlenecks with a smiley face. And the band also tweeted that if the dress code was hip and trendy, that they wouldn't even be allowed into the venue. They also held a contest for fans with a DressGate hashtag, asking them to send photos of themselves in their least trendy or hip clothes in order to win tickets to the show. So you guys can see how this is all coming together here.
It's so smart.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reaction to all of this has been divisive, with some media being critical and basically saying we don't need any more fake news. But if anything, what I think the band has done really well is shed a light on how easy it is to fool people, including media and many hardcore fans, if you're not using a skeptical lens to filter out news.
So the real lesson all along was to listen to our show.
Pretty much. I mean, this is just scratching the surface, guys. I mean, there was other really fun stuff they did. They started an official Arcade Fire line of rompers, because the male romper has been a thing lately online. And
is that like a onesie?
It's like a jumper, but shorter. Right,
like a one piece. The group teased a line of products branded with the Everything Now logo and a fake finance company. They even had like a slow cooker and their own flavor of Ben & Jerry's ice cream called My Body is a Cone.
Didn't they suggest that they were putting up the album on a fidget spinner as well?
They have a fidget spinner. It's actually a fidget spinner USB combo with digital booklet, very limited. But when you go to the site, it's 79 pounds, British pounds. And
that's so interesting. I haven't seen any of the stuff that you've talked about, except just today I saw $103 at the estimated cost of their fidget spinner.
Really? Yeah. And of course it's sold out. When you go to the site, it's all sold out, right? And I mean, there was also phony celebrity news on various hoax websites. Like, you won't believe how Arcade Fire's Win Butler got a 6-pack in just 6 minutes, and just a bunch of stuff like that. And even even planted a fake review in Stereo Yum. Called the premature evaluation. The fake review chastises writers who jump to conclusions with their takes on a new release. So, for instance, they had lines like, "We'll compare everything now unfavorably to both Funeral and The Suburbs," which are albums that the band has already put out. The funny thing is their predictions weren't entirely wrong. A lot of music critics did say that kind of stuff. So, yeah, they had a lot of fun with this campaign, and everyone is pretty much talking about it in the music community. So
it's funny because in the past I've done segments that criticize similar but different fake news stories on fake websites. Talking about Pokemon Go, we're talking about Star Wars is filming in your area, but there's something just fundamentally different about this kind of trolling that I can't help but sort of support. If that doesn't make me too much of a hypocrite, I think that's
I was about to say, I think it's worth just talking about. I don't think it's fundamentally different. I think it's just a bit different, depending on your subjective experience.
Yeah.
Typically on the show, we do not like false beliefs. We do not like myths. We say once they're out there, it's hard to get it back. Mm-hmm. I think it could be because we pretty much think all these are benign. If someone that happens to have an incorrect belief about the Arcade Fire that the Arcade Fire created and it hurts them, that's their business. Yeah. It'd be different if someone else was doing this against them, which then may hurt them in some way.
Absolutely.
But since they're doing it, well, to each their own, I guess.
And it's more like an April Fool's joke where at the end of the day, it kind of does come out what's really going on.
Oh, but we know people never follow up with what's true, right?
True.
Thanks, Cristina. Sometimes for a joke or science, timing is everything. And certainly when I've looked at a storm and heard thunder and seen lightning, I've wondered, can you count the difference between the two and tell how far a storm away is? A friend asked me this to look into it for the show, and I'd heard it for a long time. A quick question for the panel. Have you ever heard this?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, I used to do it as a kid, and we used to count, but I didn't really know the specific math.
Something about maybe like if you count a second that equals a mile or 5 seconds equal a mile. Well, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. First, let's think about what has to be true for this to work. Lightning and thunder have to occur together, and that light and sound would have to travel at different speeds. Taking the last one first, light and sound do indeed travel at different speeds, dramatically different speeds. Sound travels at about 331 plus 0.6 T meters per second, where T is the temperature in Celsius. Sorry for the American listeners, but about 335 meters a second, meaning the warmer it is, the faster sound goes. The temperature of the air does matter, as well as density, humidity, and these things, but we're not going to go into too much detail there.
But for American listeners, that's 700 and some odd miles an hour?
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah.
I can't help but share a line from Wikipedia. In common everyday speech, the speed of sound refers to the speed of sound waves in air, not Coldplay. However, the speed of sound varies from substance to substance. Sound travels most slowly in gases, it travels faster in liquids, and faster still in solids. For example, as noted above, sound travels at 343 meters per second in air. It travels at 1,400 meters a second in water, 4.3 times faster than in air, and at 5,000 meters per second in iron. In an exceptionally stiff material such as diamond, it travels at 12,000 meters a second.
But it must get attenuated so quickly in these substances you don't hear.
I think that's what the interesting thing is, because if someone screams underwater, I just never seem to hear it compared to something in the air.
Compared to when you're listening on the other end of a diamond.
Exactly.
Let me try that right now with one of my many diamonds.
I have my diamond beats from Dr. Dre.
Sorry.
Anyway, as tempting as it is to talk about the speed of sound, this segment is about storm distance. We humans work better with rounder numbers, so quoting how stuff works, 350 meters per second and 1,200 feet per second are reasonable numbers to use. So sound travels 1 kilometer in roughly 3 seconds and 1 mile in roughly 5 seconds.
Okay.
For those curious how rough that is, in dry air at 20 degrees Celsius, sound travels a kilometer in 2.91 seconds or a mile in 4.69 seconds. And lightning? Well, you know the speed of light, 299,792,458 meters per second in a vacuum, often rounded to 30 million meters a second, which is a bit faster than the 350 meters per second for sound.
I think it's safe to say the time it takes from the light hitting my eye to being processed by my brain is going to be longer than the time it takes for the lightning.
You're correct.
To get to me.
It's basically instantaneous.
Yeah.
Although that's interesting that light and sound are actually processed at different speeds in your brain.
And
by the
different intensities of light as well. Mm-hmm. There's some 3D tricks with that.
As for thunder and lightning occurring together, this has to happen because thunder is the sound of lightning. I'll be honest, when I first learned that, it kind of blew my mind. I somehow thought you could have thunder without lightning, but that does not make any sense at all. The sudden increase in pressure and temperature from lightning produces rapid expansion of the air that creates a sonic shockwave similar to a sonic boom, thank you Guile, which produces the sound of thunder. No Thors here. So, given that thunder occurs when lightning occurs, and they travel different speeds, it makes sense that the differential speed could be informative. Assuming it is visible to you, you'll see the lightning pretty much instantaneously from your perspective. With the speed of sound, if you count to say 15, that means that the storm is 5 kilometers away or 3 miles away. Now note, lightning can strike across large distances, so if you can clearly hear thunder, you are probably in range.
So I guess it is true, I just didn't have a metric to go by. I just kind of knew, well, if there's a lot of time that passes, then it's probably pretty far. And if it's like boom, boom, it's got to be next door. You know?
Right. It's the main thing that sound travels a kilometer in about 3 seconds. That's your metric.
Darren, you mentioned off mic that you asked a few people about this and probably about half didn't know, right?
Yes, half did not know that thunder is the sound of lightning. So, write in, listeners. Did you know this? And if not, what do you think it was? And thanks for joining us once again, listeners. Adam explored whether women are more likely to be harassed online than men. And under various metrics, it is not the case, but you really have to drill down and define your terms and how they might be perceived or interpreted by the people experiencing them.
Absolutely.
Cristina gave us a delightful overview of internet trolling with Arcade Fire and how you can use people's gullibility to your marketing advantage. No one apply that to anything else, though. And I showed that you can, in fact, calculate approximately the storm distance by counting between thunder and lightning. Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, Cuboids.
Stay classy, not smart-assy.
Good night, everyone.
And I'll be seeing you in 2 weeks because I'm going on a bit of vacation. If you happen to be in Vancouver or San Francisco, send me a message.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
Speaking of negative experiences online, internet trolling and the Arcade Fire. Cristina. And I said that. I said that again. In my head, I'm like, don't say the. And then I did.
I just don't know what I'm going to do with all the thes that I have to cut out of the show.
The Arcade Fire, yeah.
The Arcade Fire.
You know what? I think it was actually like a typo when I wrote it, but
It does seem like a typo. Yeah.
Darren McKee is fake news.
Well, you can't trust anyone nowadays. I'm the Arcade Fire. The
I'll be honest,
Arcade
Darren,
Fire.
it wasn't really